Good afternoon, madam, said Mrs. Lawal, who entered the principal's office with her 15-year-old daughter, who is a student of the school. She is in SS2 and she has gone against one of the rules of the school, which necessitated the need to call her parents. The school principal, Mrs. Gentry, had looked up when she had a knock on her door. After the exchange of pleasantries, Mrs. Lawal sat down, while her daughter Halima stood, bowing her head and holding her hands. "You are welcome, madam. Are you aware of what your daughter did?" asked the principal. She has told me what happened, but I know she's still hiding a part of the information, said Mrs. Lawal. "Okay, your daughter here has been cooking and bringing food to her classmates for sale, and I heard this has been going on for a long time. This is against the rules of the school and she will be punished for it," she said. Mrs. Lawal looked up at her daughter in disgust. Suddenly, she rushed to her and slapped her. Halima screamed. "That is not necessary, madam. Her punishment goes beyond spanking. She will be observing a 3 days internal suspension in the school. She won't be allowed to enter the class. She will clean the school and run other errands," said the principal. Mrs. Lawal shook her head in pain. "And to think this girl gave me the impression that she doesn't like cooking," Mrs. Lawal lamented. "Really?" "Yes, madam. Whenever I call her to come and cook in the house, you need to see the series of murmur she would engage in, how she would drag her feet before doing it. I have 2 children. She is the eldest. Her younger sister is more responsible than her. It amazes me how she has now turned herself into a cook in school." "Was that what I sent you here to do?" asked Mrs. Lawal, who faced her daughter angrily. "It's okay, madam. We will sort it out. By the time we are done with her, she won't repeat this again. But I have a question. Does she live in the same house with you?" asked the principal. "Yes, she does," replied Mrs. Lawal. The principal looked shocked. "So, how come you didn't know she was into this food business?" Mrs. Lawal heaved a sigh. "I'm a single mother. I usually get home around 8 p.m. every day. I just arrange the things they will need to cook dinner and give them instructions on how to go about it. I also have neighbors who keep an eye on them, but we both know neighbors can't stay with them all the minutes I am not there. So that was what gave her the chance to indulge in such acts. I think I need to effect some changes. I'm really sorry I failed," she said as she broke down in tears. "It's okay, madam. Motherhood is a continuous journey. No one really graduates from it. We learn every day," said Mrs. Gentry. A few minutes later, the meeting was brought to a close. Mrs. Lawal went home while her daughter started her punishment. Mrs. Lawal, who is a footwear vendor, decided henceforth that she would be taking her daughters to her shop. She implemented it for 1 week and stopped when she realized that her second daughter, who liked a quiet environment, was becoming restless. Saida likes to do her assignment, then read when she gets back from school before she proceeds to house chores. But since she started following her mother to her noisy shop, her academics suffered. Her mother's shop was always noisy. She couldn't read or do her assignments there. She has broken down in tears one day, explaining to her mother how the arrangement was disturbing her. Also, the plan didn't change Halima, who would use any slight opportunity to disappear. Whenever she realized her mother was busy, Mrs. Lawal had given her 2 slaps at 2 different times in the past 1 week of taking her to her shop. "Why are you like this? Why do you like stressing me out? Even your younger sister is more mature than you," she lamented. Halima has gone to a corner to sulk. She hated it whenever her mother said that to her. Mrs. Lawal was at crossroads on what to do. She had a word with her younger sister, who just graduated from school and was at home. There was an arrangement for her to be coming every day in the afternoon to stay with the girls until their mother comes. Her daughters weren't pleased with that, but Saida preferred it so much to going to shop. Auntie Amina is a very strict lady. This quality has been seen in her during the various times she came to their house on holidays. She disciplined them like their mother. She sometimes even beyond their mother. She started their work the next week. Her sister had told her the time they closed from school. "Why are you just coming back home despite closing by 4?" asked Auntie Amina, who had stood akimbo outside their flat, waiting for them as she resumed her duty. "It was her that delayed me. When the motorcycle driver came, I kept looking for her until I found her dancing with some other girls in a corner of the school," said Saida. "That's a lie. We were practicing for our next choir performance," Halima said. Just when Auntie Amina discovered that they were arguing with each other, she ordered them to stop and let them in. They got inside and she gave them instructions on their activities for the evening, which entailed doing their assignment, having a nap for 30 minutes, then coming to join her in the kitchen. Saida was so cool with the schedule, but Halima had issues with it. She didn't like a regimented lifestyle. She likes to do things at her own time. She hates chores and her mood drops terribly. She becomes grumpy and transfers aggression on her sister. Halima was on her mother's bad side for years before her excellent results in school began to pacify her. She had flogged her, spanked her, insulted her until she got tired. It amazes her how Halima always found a way to dodge chores while she leaves her younger sister to it. When she was much younger, Halima would feign sickness, which her mother believed to be true, and would buy her a lot of things to appease her. Her mother had peeped on her one day after giving her the impression that she had left the room she was sleeping in. After she went to serve the food, Mrs. Lawal had peeped from the hole on the doorknob and saw her daughter dancing vigorously immediately she left the room. She didn't know she was being peeped on. Mrs. Lawal had opened the door and caught her in the act. Halima couldn't say anything. Since then, that no longer worked. Mrs. Lawal had been hard on her in the weeks after that, trying to subdue her into getting used to chores. "You are going to be a future wife and mother. You can't avoid chores," she would say. She had been able to get Halima to adjust a little. "You will do as I say," Auntie Amina yelled at Halima, who had hurriedly washed the plates and sliced the vegetables and made for her room. Her auntie wanted her to do more. Halima frowned. "These women are becoming a pain in my house," she thought. She had gone back grudgingly to the kitchen to continue. Miss Lawal had come back that day and thanked her sister for staying with her children when she was gone. Halima complained to her how she didn't like her presence. "It means I made the right choice," said her mother. "What do you mean?" "If the person I brought is someone you like, then it means there is fire on the mountain. It means that person supports you to do evil. I will never allow that happen," said Mrs. Lawal, who went inside. Saida sat on the couch, staring at her sister, laughing. "I warned you not to waste your time. Auntie is exactly like mom, so she will support her," she said. Halima hissed and went inside. The arrangement continued as Auntie Amina came on other days and ensured the girls carried out their street routine. Saida was cool with it, but Halima became depressed. She had no issues with helping out in the kitchen and going back to her routine of what she would like to do with her evenings. Her auntie, just like her mother, always wanted her to stay with them all through their time in the kitchen. That's what irks her, the fact that she doesn't get to spend her evening on herself. Her friends noticed her sober mood in the school and tried to cheer her up. They gave her a lot of suggestions to get rid of the aunty, some of which included adding a purging powder into her food daily until she gets sick. I can't utter. I don't have it in me, Halima said. She continued enduring the situation. Soon, it was the second half of the term, and parents were invited for open day. The announcement is usually made on the parents' platform. On this day, Mrs. Lawal had visited her daughter's school and went to their class teachers. When she was seated before Halima's class teacher, her daughter's academic record for the first half of the term was given to her. Mrs. Lawal stared at it and raised her head in worry, facing her daughter who had been standing beside her. What's the meaning of this, Halima? Why is your result this terrible? Halima said nothing. I don't understand. When did you add failure in school to your long list of crimes? She asked. Halima, please excuse us, the teacher said. Halima stepped out. I noticed that she has become so withdrawn and sad in the past few weeks. And that was when we had our first continuous assessment test. I want to believe that contributed to this failure. But from what I know, she hasn't been her usual self. Mrs. Lawal stared in deep thought, wondering what might be wrong with her. When she got home later that day, she called Halima and asked her what had been going on with her. Your teacher said you have been unhappy. Why? She asked. That's because of the presence of this auntie that is here, replied Halima. Mrs. Lawal's eyes popped open in shock. Really? How? Halima was quiet for some seconds before talking. She doesn't let me have time to myself. She forces me to be in the kitchen all the time. I don't like it, she said. It now made sense to Mrs. Lawal. Oh, you need freedom to perpetrate more crimes, right? Halima stared at her in shock, wondering where her mother got this wrong belief that she indulges in crime from. She came to that conclusion simply because she leaves the house every evening for her friend's place. If only mommy knows I don't go there to do bad things, she thought. Your auntie isn't living here anytime soon, and I must not get this kind of result at the end of the term, else you will hate yourself in this house. I know how hard I work to take care of you. You can't just wake up one day and decide to fail. I will show you pepper in this house, Mrs. Lawal threatened. Halima broke down into tears and rushed out of the room. She had thought the meeting would pacify her, not knowing it would aggravate her more. She hated herself and her situation. She missed her father. She wished he were there. The situation continued until the end of the term, and her results remained terrible. During the holiday, the girls were sent off to their paternal rich auntie's house for their holidays. It was their first time going there. Mrs. Bakare's house was such a pleasant place to be. It was a mighty mansion, and they had servants to attend to their needs. Halima found it peaceful there. She was able to write a 200-page novel before the end of the holiday. When the holidays ended, they had to go back home. Halima wasn't happy, but she has no choice. Mom, I was able to write a book at Auntie's house, said Halima to her mother at home. Okay, replied Mrs. Lawal, who continued sewing a cloth with her hand without checking the book her daughter raised. I just hope you transfer this energy into your academics next time, she said. Halima felt disappointed. She went and kept her book. School resumed and the hectic routine continued again. Auntie Amina resumed her work in their house, and she hasn't changed one bit in her approach. Do you know poverty is the reason for many of our quarrels in this house? Halima asked her sister one day when they were relaxing in their room. How? Saida asked. If we had money, we won't have to be quarreling over who should do chores or not. Someone will be paid to do that. Do you know my refusal to do chores as much as mom wants me to do them is the reason mom hates me? She said. Don't say that. Mom doesn't hate you, said Saida. Halima sneered. She doesn't hate me. Neither am I her favorite. It's written all over her. I can't pretend not to see it. Mom has refused to see my other positive attributes and has allowed only that weakness of mine be cloud her sight. Halima, Saida, where are you people? Aunty Amina had called from outside their room. You see what I am saying? We can't even have a 10 minutes discussion without being interrupted to come do chores, she said. For the next few days, Halima spent more time sitting alone and ruminating. She had stopped her evening outings. When she was done from chores, she would just sit somewhere quiet in the compound and start recalling the beauty of wealth that she experienced in her auntie's house. She spent just 3 weeks there, but the experience lingered on. The mansion had many beautiful things and lifestyle. Beyond the many beautiful things in the house, she loved the elegant lifestyle wealth brings. The way her auntie looked, though old, but always looked young. The way she spoke, voice so clean. The kind of friends she keeps. Halima saw many beautiful women in her 3 weeks of staying there than the many years she had spent with her mother. She loved the kind of discussions that happened in that home. No quarrel about who to do chores. Just business talks, contract talks, business lunches, ceremonies, etc. Sunday service in that house was another appeal. Her auntie attended one of the most popular churches in the city. Church had magnificent aesthetics. The congregation were outstanding in their look and carriage. The music was heavenly. Halima didn't want to go back home the 3 times she went to church. She also recalled the setting of the dining table every morning. Their table was always set like table for kings. There would be many open dishes in golden kitchenwares set on the table. Some had fruits, some had expensive biscuits, some had beef, some had chicken, some had pork. There was also different wine glasses for the exotic wines on the table. The house has a library and recreation centers. Halima was able to improve her dance steps because there were subscriptions on dance stations on the TV in her room. She just had to turn on the television, watch the instructor and practice, a luxury she didn't have in her own home that made her visit her dancing partner every evening. Halima had a lot of smiles in her 3 week stay with them. She didn't even know she had so much smiles in her. Saida, on the other hand, didn't really take note of the striking difference between the living conditions in that house and her real house. She just enjoyed everything and snapped back easily to her former house when they got back. She didn't feel as much emotions as Halima over the wealth in the house. It struck no chord in her heart at all. She forgot the experience as soon as she got into her house. But not for Halima. Months after she left the house, she still ruminated over the experience there. There was an impact of that on her lifestyle. She began to hate poverty with a grand disgust. More shocking was how she now saw poverty in everything in the house. Why is this fish bitter? If we must eat dry fish, can't it be the sweet one? Oh God, said Halima. Halima, Saida, their mother had screamed from her room one day in the morning while they were preparing for school. The girls went to her room. Who came to this scream while I was away yesterday? She asked, eyes flashing in anger, her finger pointing to a bottle of cream that had spilled on the floor. I didn't come near it, said Saida. Mrs. Lawal turned her gaze on Halima. Yesterday, when I was trying to look for blade, I came here and I picked the blade beside the cream, but it didn't pour out while I was here. I don't know when that happened. Yes, that's because your aunt does nothing but destroys. I'm very sure you didn't place the bottle very well on the surface. That's why it fell and spilled while you were away. Do you know how much I bought this cream? Upon all my sufferings day and night, you people have decided I won't have any tangible savings, right? Mom, I'm sorry, I won't do that again, she said. Shut up, Of what use is your sorry now that I have to buy another cream? Do you know what I go through every day to make money? Halima stood there for 10 minutes while her mother lashed out at her. She went to school in a very bad mood. Her mother has always been like that when something goes to waste. She doesn't care if it's a honest mistake. She will make you regret it by telling you how you are out to ruin her. At this point, Halima linked it to poverty. She remembered when her aunty, Mrs. Bakari, lost something while she was there. After searching for it for a few minutes, she ordered a replacement. No shout, no stress, no curse words, nothing. I so much love their lives, she soliloquized. Her resolve to get rid of poverty in her family grew stronger. She started resisting Auntie Amina. When she gets home, she goes to the kitchen, does her part of the chores and disappears out of the house before her auntie has the chance to call her to the kitchen. She would go for hours and not come back just when she knows her auntie would have gone. Auntie Amina leaves the house 30 minutes before their mother comes back. Auntie Amina had given her a serious tongue lashing the next day, threatening to tell her mother if she repeated that attitude. The next day, she refused to come back from school on time. Her sister had to come home alone. She had sent her sister to tell her auntie that she was reading. She went home around 6 o'clock. She endured another series of tongue lashings from her. At this point, she reported to her sister, Mrs. Lawal, who had flogged her when she got home at night. Did Halima change? Some weeks later, it was the festive season period and Halima's school had organized a Christmas carol slated to take place in 2 weeks' time for all the students and teachers. They were to contribute a certain sum of money. Halima made a plan with some girls in her class and they decided to do an intra-class carol. They would have their own carol in the class before the school carol and they would all pay money to sponsor the event. It was meant to be a secret. Their class is at a hidden part of the school and teachers are always busy working on the results. So they were so sure they would have a each free event. Halima and her friends shared it with other class members and they agreed. She also supervised the registration of various events that would happen that day. Dancing, poetry, drama and all. She created the order of program and allocated duties to them all. Soon, what was meant to be a secret extended to the next class, who also decided to do theirs. The next class got wind of it and copied it, on and on, until a teacher knew. The students involved were brought into the staff room for questioning, and after intense grilling, they mentioned Halima as the initiator of the plan. The school frowned against such act, and Halima was given 2 days internal suspension, which entailed she sweeps some classes. Her mother was also invited again. Mrs. Lawal was frustrated at this point. She had flogged her so much at night, but something told her the girl's issue went beyond flogging. It occurred to her that her method of using her sister to stay with them while she was in shop didn't change anything. In her confused state, she spoke with a friend who advised her to hire someone to stay in the shop in the evening while she stays home with her children in the evening when they are back from school. And keep an eye on her well. I feel there is a lot of things you are yet to know about her, said Mrs. David. The advice was a difficult one for Mrs. Lawal to follow. Her peak selling hours fall in the evening and she doesn't trust anybody enough to manage that for her. She wanted to start taking them to her shop again, but she recalled that she had once tried it and it didn't work out well. Some days later, when the girls had gone to school, she deliberately delayed going to the shop. She went into Halima's room and searched through her things. After 10 minutes of searching, she saw a pile of notebooks arranged at a corner of the room. Did she forget her school notes? She soliloquized. She sat down and opened them one by one. She saw the familiar writing of her daughter. She saw that each book has a title title, and each had the content from the first page to the last page. She took her time to make sense of the content of the books, about 10 of them. Some of them were fictions, and none of the stories were less than 200 pages. Some were articles, some were poems. Were such a masterpiece with amazing content. So this is what this girl spends the whole of her time doing. No wonder she has been failing in school. How does one write this kind of things and still have time for schoolwork? She said. She packed them and took them into her room. She decided, pending the time she would make up her mind on what to do, they would keep following her to the shop. Halima had got home that afternoon, and within 2 minutes of getting back into her room, she knew something was missing. Why is that place suddenly scanty? She muttered, staring at the location that once had a pile of books. Mom, where are my books? She screamed. Why are you screaming? Mom isn't at home. Have you forgotten she's expecting us in the shop? Asked Saida. Halima ignored her and ransacked the room, looking for her books. After a failed attempt, frustration written all over her, she called her mother on the phone. Mom, did you come into my room while I was away? She asked. Your room? No, I left for shop as soon as I left your school. What is it, and when are you guys coming to the shop? I'm expecting you, she said. Halima cut the call and continued searching vigorously. When Saida reminded her that they were getting late for shop, she screamed at her. I am not going to any shop until I see my treasures. You can go if you like. Saida was scared and left the room. They didn't go to shop, and Mrs. Lawal had to close early to find out why. And Saida explained the reason for their refusal to come to the shop to her. She was furious and slapped Halima. How dare you flout my order because of whatever it is you are looking for? Is that thing more important than the instruction I gave you? Can you see you are a bad influence on your sister? You are teaching her to disobey me. Be warned, Halima. I have had enough from you in this house, said Mrs. Lawal as Halima sobbed. She left the room and continued sobbing in her room. That night, she slept for just a few hours. She picked a new notebook she had in her reserve and started writing. She wrote far into the morning, and she had just few pages of the book yet untouched by the time it was morning. She had puffy eyes in the morning due to lack of sleep. Mother failed to notice it. She went to school and kept dozing in class. Her teacher had to make her stand before she could concentrate in class. At this stage, she had developed a hatred for her mother. She wished her father were alive. She felt her mother made no attempt to understand her at all. In the evening, they had gone to their mother's shop like she instructed. She had bought more books with her savings. She got to the shop and continued writing. Her mother had passed by and asked her what she was writing. Before she could respond, customers came into the shop. Before they left, another set of customers came in. On and on until night. Halima had a hard time keying into her creativity in the noisy environment. She was able to write just 3 pages within the 3 hours she spent there, and she wasn't happy with it. Mrs. Lawal had ruminated on what was so important about writing that she had made up her mind to replace the books she lost. Does this girl know there is no money in writing? Piracy will injure your investment. Go and ask those who are into it, she soliloquized. Soon, they went home. Halima made up her mind that she wasn't going to be in shop the next day. She planned to replace all the books she lost. Her gut feeling told her that her mother took them. But who is she to ask her? What's up, Halima? We are here to talk to you. What's been happening to you? Asked Isikak, one of the 2 girls that had come to her during break while in the school canteen. Halima was shocked at the question. What do you mean? Nothing is wrong with me, she said. Isikak shook her head. A lot is wrong with you. Since towards late last term and all through this term, is about to end. Your creative juice has not been flowing like before. We knew how many groups you created in this school and how you set them rolling. You created the drama group of this school, the choir and dance department. You created an invisible library too, where we bought books and learnt one another. But this time, nothing from you. You have just been too calm. What's going on? She asked. Halima looked at her, and it occurred to her that truly she had fallen short of her creativity in the past months. I have been going through a lot of emotional distress, which has affected me. I tried so hard not to let it affect me, but I didn't know it affected me this much. I didn't even know you would notice that about me. Thanks for your sensitivity, she said. Her friends looked at her with pity. Is there a way we can help? Asked Favor, the second girl. I don't think so. It is family issues, she said. No matter what, girl, don't allow anything or anyone kill your vibes. You have got so much in you, okay? Said Nsikak. Halima thanked them and they dispersed. Halima heaved a sigh, wondering how she can make her mother understand her better and cooperate with her to give her an enabling environment that would help her creativity. They still continued to follow their mother to her shop, and Halima still continued writing the books she had lost. She was devastated at the loss of her books because she planned to strengthen her dancing skills at that time, but here she is trying to replace the books. Why can't you just let them go? Saida had asked her, especially about those books. Halima stared at her. Those are my treasures. They remind me of how talented I am, and whenever I need to create something new, taking a look at them spurs me on. They are my muse, she said. One evening, Halima had left her mother's shop to the next compound to write when her mother's shop was bubbling with customers. She wanted to tell her where she was going, but she was too busy to hear her. She went out of the shop. Few minutes later, her mother was looking for her. Halima, she screamed. She walked in and out of the shop looking for her. Saida too had no idea where she went because she wasn't in the shop when Halima left the shop. Meanwhile, Halima was already packing her books and getting ready to leave the compound when a young man that lived in the compound approached her and started a conversation with her. You are so beautiful, said Jerry. I know, thank you, Halima replied as she tried to leave. Jerry held her hand. Come on, don't be in such a hurry. I don't bite, he said. Just then, Mrs. Lawal walked past the compound and saw her daughter being held by a man. Halima, so this is where you have been? You mean you don't have plans to change anytime soon, you this girl, she said. As she came in and pushed the young man from her daughter, she gave Halima a hot slap. Mom, I did nothing wrong. I came here to write and... She slapped her again. Who sent you? Who did you tell before coming here? You want to kill me, right? Mrs. Lawal screamed as she collected the books forcefully from Halima and tore them. By this time, a small crowd had gathered. It's okay. Calm down, woman. Let her explain her side of the story, one of them had said. She has no side whatsoever to explain. She has always been a disgraceful child to me, she said. Just then, Halima, who had been in a bent position, holding her cheeks and crying, suddenly ran out of the compound. Come back here! Come back! She shouted as Halima continued running. The crowd watched her as she left. Some women were pacifying Mrs. Lawal and telling her to take things easy. Mrs. Lawal had faced the young man and locked his clothes. What were you telling my daughter? Does she look like a mature lady to you? Didn't you see your age mates that you could talk to? He was afraid. It took the women's intervention to get her to free the man. Saida was at the gate, crying. Mrs. Lawal went back to her shop, trying to figure out where Halima had gone. Run as long as you like. You will meet me here today, she said as she sat in her shop, shaking her legs. Saida stood outside the shop, trying to see if she would see her sister. After 2 hours of waiting, Halima was nowhere to be found. At this point, Mrs. Lawal was worried. "Bring my keys. Maybe she has gone home," she said to Saida. "I think we should check the environment more. I'm afraid. How could she have gone home without money? There's no transport fare on her," Saida said. "She isn't a child. She will meet us at home. I'm sure she has no other home, so she has no choice than to meet us at home," she said. They got into the car and went home. Saida had rushed down from the car to the apartment. "Halima! Halima!" she had called frantically, hoping to see her, but she didn't see her. She had gone to knock on the neighbor's door. One of the children had come out. "Sorry to disturb you." "Have you seen her?" asked Saida with a teary face. "I haven't seen her. Isn't she supposed to be with you people?" he asked. Saida left him when she realized he clearly had no solution to their problem. Mrs. Lawal had gone to her apartment, trying to see if she would see her hiding in any of the nooks and crannies, but she didn't see her. She opened the door. Maybe she has an extra key. No sight of her. It didn't occur to her that her daughter would one day run from home. Saida had come in crying. Mrs. Lawal was at this point afraid. She went out again into the street to look for her. She had woken all her neighbors up and asked when last they saw Halima. None of them had seen her. They advised her to report to the police. She drove to the police station and they told her to only make a report after 24 hours. "How am I supposed to sit and do nothing until 24 hours? She cried. "That's the law, madam." A neighbor escorted her out of the station and took her back home. It was such a long night. Mrs. Lawal and Saida couldn't sleep. They kept opening the front door to see if she had sneaked into the compound. The next day, Mrs. Lawal and Saida dressed up and hurried to the school. She must definitely go to school, she said, but somehow Saida didn't think she would be in school. Her school uniform is at home and she wouldn't dare go to school in mufti. Their school had strict rules, but her mother insisted. They went to school and Mrs. Lawal had stayed at the security stand for 3 hours, thinking she would see her. When it was clear she didn't enter the school, she went into the school principal and broke down in tears. "I haven't seen my daughter since yesterday. Help me, oh," she cried, rolling on the floor. The principal was shocked at the news. She stood up and went to pacify her. She made her sit down while she sent a message to her class teacher. "Hello, miss. Have you seen Halima Lawal in school today?" asked the principal. "No, madam. I've been to their class today and I didn't see her. Her classmates said they haven't seen her too," she said. "When last did you see her?" asked the principal. "I saw her yesterday around 5 p.m. She was going home with her sister," she replied. The principal heaved a sigh. "This is her mother. She said they had an altercation in the shop yesterday and since then they haven't seen her," said the principal. The class teacher looked shocked. "Something hasn't been right with that girl for a while now. I haven't been able to place my hand on it. Her classmates can testify how on 2 different occasions I had asked her if she was fine. Madam, your daughter has been looking and acting so withdrawn for a long time. Didn't you notice that about her?" asked the class teacher. The principal signaled her to stop when she realized it got the mother more emotional. "I don't know what this girl wants from me. I give her food, shelter, I put all things that would make the house comfortable in the house for them. I don't know why she has been such a difficult daughter. Her sister is nothing like her. Is this a punishment from God or what?" "My dear husband, are you asleep?" she said. "Madam, please calm down. May God help you protect her and direct her back home. Keep praying and don't fail to report to the police. If we have any information that can help, we will let you know," said the principal. After some minutes of persuasion, she left the principal's office. "Miss, please try to find out her friends in the class and bring them to me," said the principal. The class teacher nodded and left the office. Mrs. Lawal had gone home, hoping she would see her there. Please, my baby, come back home. Mommy is sorry, she soliloquized. She got home and Halima wasn't in sight. She sat outside for an hour, watching those coming into the compound and those leaving. Her daughter wasn't among them. Some of her neighbors had come to comfort her, asking her when she would report to the police. They told her they would let her know if they saw her. She was trying so hard to swallow tears. She went to her shop, hoping she would come to shop, but no sight of her. That day was the most terrible day of her life. I can't bear this alone, she cried as she picked her phone and called her late husband's sister, Mrs. Bakare. She explained everything to her. Calm down, God will intervene, she said. After the call, Mrs. Bakare called the DPO of the police jurisdiction in that area and explained her plight to her. Being a powerful woman, they swung into action. They collected her picture from her mother and went into the streets to look for her. Within 2 days, they found her. We found her roaming aimlessly around the streets, said a police officer. Mrs. Lawal and Saida were in the station, crying at the terrible sight of Halima, who looked frail and dirty in the same clothes she had worn from home that day. My daughter, where have you been? Said Mrs. Lawal, who had rushed to her to hug her. Halima stepped away, ignoring her. I don't want to have anything to do with her. I would rather go back to the streets, said Halima. Keep quiet. Where do you think you are? Do you know what this woman has gone through in the past 3 days? You think this is your house where you can do as you like? Said one of the policemen who had shouted at her. Halima didn't look scared a bit. Just then, a phone call came in. Yes, ma. She's here, ma, said the policeman, who took his phone to Halima. Madam wants to speak with you. Halima was surprised as she didn't know who the madam was. She picked it, and when she realized it was her aunty, her face brightened. Please, I don't know if I can live with you. I don't want to go back home. It is tough living here. I won't go back home, she pleaded passionately. To Mrs. Lawal's surprise, she felt bad. After the call, the phone was taken to Mrs. Lawal and she kept replying okay to what Mrs. Bakare was saying. After the call, it was concluded she would be taken to Lagos that very day, as that was what she wanted and Mrs. Bakare had approved it. Let's go home and dress you up, said Mrs. Lawal. I'm not going back to that house, she said. The police said they had a bathroom there, so Mrs. Lawal was advised to go get her clothes. She went, sobbing. Mrs. Lawal sobbed all the journey home as the cab driver kept driving. Saida was comforting her. What did I do to your sister that made her disgrace me in such a manner? She said. Mom, it's okay. Please don't cry. It's good that we have seen her. At least we know she is going to a safe place. She will come around, she said. Halima woke up on her soft bed the next morning to the scintillating aroma of breakfast. Her aunty had come to her room to call her in her shiny, attractive pink lingerie. She had sat on her bed, held her fondly, and had a warm discussion with her. After breakfast, she was taken to a new school and enrolled there. House had maids that did everything. She had taken one of the chores, decided she would do them daily. She was always in the living room to welcome her auntie. She would give her a warm hug, collect her bag, sit beside her and ask her how her day was. The house didn't have her sister and mother in it, but she loved the serenity in the house. She wrote more books, practiced more dance steps with the various dance channels on her DSTV. She had a lot of empty space to stretch and practice yoga. Her creativity bloomed fully. Her auntie got aware of her numerous unpublished books and helped her publish 2 out of them. Not only that, she excelled in her new school as she was made to represent them in a debate competition that was aired on the TV. Saida had seen it and called her mother excitedly to see it. Mrs. Lawal had called Mrs. Bakare excitedly to talk to her. Parenting a creative child needs a creative and wise approach. You don't bring out the best out of them by being harsh on them. They don't thrive in an environment of fear. You complained she was lazy, but I haven't seen any laziness in her since she came. She does chores even when I don't ask her to. But she likes spending more of her time on things that enhance her creativity. Do you know the reason she leaves the house and takes a walk is because it helps her put words together as a writer? Do you know she resisted everything that disallowed her from having time alone because that's when she practices new dance steps and she likes doing that privately? How did I know all this? I stumbled on her diary where she wrote all these things. Did you even know she had a diary? Bimpe, you can do better. Anyway, what you saw on TV is just one of the many new developments in her life. She now heads a dance group in her new school. I ensured she went through the right process by involving the school authority. You should have guided her on how to use her abilities more productively. Anyway, I've been appealing to her on your behalf. I will keep doing so until she's ready to talk to you, she said, and cut the call. Mrs. Lawal stared at her wall in regret.